put himself between Stuart and his British Army and the British Army at Charleston. So he goes the long way around, crosses at Camden, crosses the Congaree at Howell's Ferry, and the night before the battle of Utah Springs, he's roughly advanced, which is what, 16 miles from Utah Springs? The British do not know he is there. As they go to sleep, and that night, like Horse Harry Lee said, the British Army slept well. They had no idea that Greene was within striking distance. The morning of the 8th, at 4 o'clock, Greene rouses his troops, and they start on the march to Utah Springs. For those of you who are local, the first engagement happened just in front of St. Julian's Plantation on the Old River Road. There was a routing party out there with very light defense, and Greene and Stuart finally decided, because he had some rumors from American deserters that Greene was on the move, maybe he better go out and check. So he sent Coffin, that's more South Carolina Royalist, up the road, and they encounter what they think is just a small party of the American Army, and it turns out it's Light Horse Harry Lee and the whole American Army. So after that alarm, they rush back and to Utah Springs, and Stuart establishes a battle line, but there are skirmishes from the St. Julian's Plantation clear into the area. Now, for those of you who have been at the park, Utah Springs is roughly 2 acres. And at the time, there was a clearing of 8 acres. That was all. Where the battle started depends on who you read. It could have been as much as a mile. That's what William Milton James says. Or 500 yards or whatever. But it was well forward of the British camp where the battle started. The archaeologists now think that that battleground was roughly a mile square. Now, everybody who was anybody, with the exception of George Washington, was at Utah Springs. In the middle of the road, and you'll see the road tomorrow, you've got the North Carolina militia under Malmedy. To his right, away from the lake, Francis Marion with about 260. And to his right, Light Horse Harry Lee. On the other side of the road, with Malmedy in the middle and the North Carolinas, you have more militia under Andrew Pickens. And to his right, state troops under Henderson and Wade Hampton, another name you all should know. And that's a long line across. That's the first line. The second line, you've got North Carolina Continentals, Virginia Continentals, Maryland Continentals, and Delaware and William Washington as reserve. It is a massive battle. And it goes back and forth, and at first, the Americans push the British off the right side of the field. And they thought the battle was over. Now, if you've got 400 weapons with black powder and 6 cannons spewing smoke, there's no way you can see across the battlefield. And the people on that, the right of the American line, thought the battle was over, they'd won. So they stopped to celebrate. And how well they celebrated depends on the records that you read. But the British were able to regroup, get into the brick house, and thwart Greene. Greene had a lot of casualties. We're now at least 4 hours into the battle itself. There are accounts of people wading in blood up to their ankles. And Light Horse Harry Lee talks about men standing dead, impaled on each other's bayonets. And Greene decides to withdraw and regroup. And he needs water, so he goes back to Burdell's plantation, leaving Wade, Hampton, and a picket on the field. The next day, Greene comes back, and the British are ready to leave. Lighthorse Harry Lee and Francis Marion are behind the British lines. But when reinforcements come up, they fade into the woods. Lighthorse Harry Lee and Francis Marion take prisoners the whole way to Charleston. Now, this is September the 8th, and the British are now moving into the Charleston area. They've lost everything in Georgia except Savannah. They've lost everything in South Carolina except a few at Moncks Corner, a few at Worcester, and the British who were in Charleston. Now the question is, who won the Battle of Utah Springs? Well, early on, the Americans were reported to have won it. And there are several accounts of the great victory. Congress gave Greene a medal. But then the British, they decided the British won because they held the field. Well, my question is, how much of the field do you have to hold? The British never buried their dead. And they left about 60 wounded on the field when they evacuated it. It does not sound like they controlled very much of that battlefield. But it doesn't matter who won or lost at Utah Springs, because 5 weeks later at Yorktown, Cornwallis surrendered. And when he surrendered, England had no claim over Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, except a few troops in Savannah and Charleston, and without the surrounding country, no way to beat them. So Britain never made a claim for South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina. If they, without Greene, whether he won that battle or not, he won the campaign. Without Greene, we would all be starting our programs with God Save the Queen. And I know all the words, in case you'd like to know. It has only been recently that there has been much interest in the Battle of Utah Springs. To me, it's the epitome of Greene's campaign to take back the South. There's a lot of archaeological work going on now, and hopefully we will teach people to cherish that area. At Utah Springs, the valiant died. Their limbs with dust are covered o'er. We Bonnie Springs, your tearful tide, how many heroes are no more? If in this wreck of ruin they can yet be thought to claim a tear, oh, smite thy gentle breast and say, the friends of freedom slumber here. Or as William Johnson wrote, the early 1800s, Utah Springs is sacred ground, where the mold is moistened by the best blood of our country. Thank you. Oh, the swamp fox.
The swamp fox got the red coat.
Yes, the swamp fox got the. Thank you very, very much.
All right, we're going to take just 5 or 10 minutes before our next speaker, so you can stretch your feet and talk. Has the kind of name that takes a lot of personality to live up to, but I'm sure that he has it. In the American Indian dialect, it means Mingo Big Bear. Well, he is the chief of the Chickasaw Indians of the Indian town community, and he has done so much for that community that it would take too long to list, but you can read more about him in your package that you have. He's also a lay minister, a self-taught architect, engineer, and artist. Has also written several books, and today he's going to talk about American Indian participation. I present Mr. Vernon Tanner.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try my best to stay behind this podium. I might range all over it, but I've got some marks on the floor where I need to stay inside. So, it was kind of strange on your face seeing an Indian for the first time, right? I may not be as nervous as you are. You see, as a speaker, I'm not a college professor, so I don't Dr. Stoops asked me